Beach Post's lunch hour live stream here with Long Beach Unified School District Superintendent Jill Baker. Jill, thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome. Glad to be here with you today, Mike.
So just to let everyone know, we've got Jill for about a half hour here. We've gotten a ton of questions already. I've sort of been filtering those to what seem like the most representative. I'm not going to be asking the superintendent where your child can pick up their books for a specific class. But as always, for specific information, consult your child's school. First of all, Jill, just up top, is there any sort of new news about anything that you've got to share? Just because I know stuff is still kind of changing, with some frequency.
Yeah, no brand new news today, just continuing to get ready. Our schools are super excited. I know today there were a number of orientations for freshmen and for sixth graders and some school tours that families were out and about to experience. So just getting ready for our kids.
Yeah, that's my first question is just what's the emotion like in the head office and among the principals and staff that you've talked to? It's been a year and a half since you guys really had your full enrollment or close to the full enrollment on campus. So what's the sentiment and the mood like among you guys?
Yeah, I think our team across the district is just super excited to see our students. I've often said that it is our students in buildings that just create the energy that makes a school building become a community. And so things are ready. And I've heard from many staff as I've been out in the district in the last week that just the faces of families and students is really their why, and knowing what's about to happen with students coming into classrooms is really creating a lot of excitement across the city. We know there's some nervousness, and we have students that have not been in a classroom for 18 months. And so our team has done everything they can to think of that transition and to prepare classrooms and schools for that transition. I can tell you a little bit about that planning if you'd like me to.
Well, yeah, we'll jump into that in a second. But my first question from me, and then we'll get to more of the reader Q&As around what you just mentioned is, I covered the school board meeting last week. This is my 14th year covering Long Beach schools and kids. And I know you've been around the district longer than I have. I've never seen anything like that school board meeting. I mean, in many ways, the city is very polarized on, it feels like everything. And that's not just the city, it's the country. But, you have some parents who are saying they think masks are child abuse. You have some parents saying that I'd really rather my kid not go to school this year. How do you, as a superintendent with 70,000 students, 100,000 parents, how do you lead everyone as a group, in one direction? I'm just kind of curious for your perspective on trying to pull the city through that aspect of this difficult time.
Sure. I mean, first and foremost, I'd say that if my own student, who actually graduated from Long Beach Unified School District, were preparing to go back to school, he would be going to school on Tuesday. I feel that our safety measures that are in place, the commitment from teachers, nursing staff, principals, and all of our support staff has readied our schools to be healthy and safe places. I also think the community should know. So yes, that was a very emotional meeting. And if you think that's, if that describes or illustrates the entire public's perspective, then there is a lot of emotion out there. Also know that most of our families are feeling a sense of confidence and trust in the health and safety protocols that have been established. And there are some that are not feeling that. I think we're really fortunate as an educational community in our city. We have our own health department. And so when we think about medically oriented decisions like wearing a mask or not wearing a mask, we have a great medical team in our health department staff who guides us in that decision making. So I'm a doctor, but not a medical doctor. Fortunately, we've got Dr. Davis and her team who can really help to guide us by evidence and by science.
So on that note, can you run me through the precautions you guys have taken? I know you discussed them at the school board meeting, but including obviously the recent decision last week to test a portion of the student population.
Sure. Yeah. So we'll start with masking. So we will have students and staff wearing masks in all indoor spaces, and the option for them to wear masks when they're not in an indoor space. Families have asked that, can my student wear a mask outside? Absolutely. If that makes a child feel more comfortable, or the parent wants to offer that or have their students do that, they can absolutely do that. I've expressed and shared many times that we have upgraded ventilation systems, both in systems with HVAC that have the MERV 13 or plus filters, or they have a HEPA filter if it's a stationary air filtration system. We have really worked with our teams to know the things that they need to think about before they come to work. So if a teacher is feeling any sense of symptoms, we're really reinforcing that no one comes to work sick. And if you're a student, that you don't come to school sick. That has a mixed message, we know, because we want our students to be in school, but we don't want them to be in school if they're experiencing any symptoms. And then what we saw work really well last spring, cleaning and hand hygiene, lots of hand sanitizer in all of classrooms, and slowing things down in classrooms so that students really take time to use the health and safety protocols. We'll also have things, and this might sound simple, but we've got things like every elementary student will get a reusable water bottle that is their own to use in a water filling station. And so just thinking about everything that students use in a classroom, kits of supplies that belong specifically to the student. And then of course we have all kinds of protocols ready for responding if there are situations that require a COVID response in a school building.
I wanted to ask you for a little bit more details on the testing, just because, obviously when you announced that, it was sort of more details to come. What is that going to look like? Is that something where people are testing and there'll be results before they start school? Or I think, as you know, I have 2 kids going to elementary school. What are we doing with them for testing? We have to register somewhere, and then when does the testing happen?
So our testing program that's been guided by the health department is not a prior to starting school testing program. It is the opportunity to help with something that we can do by having asymptomatic screening for several weeks at least that helps us determine where we might need to be more focused in terms of mitigating factors, or where we see more COVID taking place. So it's not a student has to be tested before they walk in the first day. We've committed to several weeks of asymptomatic screening, surveillance testing that it is sometimes called, so that if there are cases, if there are families that were not aware that their student had COVID, we're protecting the family, and we're also thinking about other students that could come into the building based on that, the testing results.
Right. Are there lessons that you've learned? Obviously, the Long Beach starts a little bit later than most of the other school districts. I think LAUSD has been back for a week and a half. Some other school districts for longer than that. Are there lessons that you guys or the health department have seen from other people's reopenings that have kind of influenced the way you've thought about doing things, or putting more restrictions somewhere or easing them off somewhere else?
Sure. I mean, I interact with superintendents across the nation who have gone before us, a couple of local districts in Orange County that have started before us. And I think that what we have developed for the start of school is as strong as any other district around us. What I've learned from them, I think it affirms that students come in, they have not had any issues with students wearing their masks, even some that might have been reticent because of a conversation at home that has made them feel uncomfortable. Once they're at school, students they engage with their peers with their mask on, they can listen to their teacher, and they can fully participate in school with a mask on. And so many of the districts that I've talked to, they're also doing a asymptomatic screening process. And I can just affirm from what they've shared, the kinds of tests that we're talking about are easy to administer. They're painless to a student. They're guided by someone who is a supportive adult that's right there with them. 10 seconds and the screening test is completed. And so, yeah.
Is it you mentioned, I think, at the school board meeting, when my son went back to school last spring, we did a test just at the front of the nose. It's that one, right? It's here and not here. That's right. The way to put it. Okay.
Anterior nasal swab kind of test. Yes.
I didn't pay enough attention in my anatomy class that I took as an LBUSD student. So anterior nasal swab, not necessarily getting through to me, but here, not here, I get.
Yes. And actually I'll encourage members of the community who are listening or who hear this talk later that we actually have some examples up on our district YouTube channel that show what it actually looks like for a student to use the swab test.
Okay, so one question that has come through on the live chat Q&A, and that I know a number of people had emailed me about, is the decision to test unvaccinated students but not vaccinated students with the asymptomatic screening or surveillance testing, whatever language is being used. What went into that decision, and maybe how much of that sort of testing regime is you guys constructing it versus the health department? I know that you mentioned that you guys are sort of collaborating on all this stuff, so.
Yeah, absolutely. That decision was guided by the health department in thinking about, again, screening, not testing so that someone can come back to school, but continuing to screen to think about where we might need to focus our efforts after a few weeks. Those few weeks will give us a baseline that will allow us to make good decisions after those first few weeks when students are back in school. So it's different for us. I mean, the folks know we were the first large California district to open back in the spring. That was before the Delta variant. And so we want to have really good data to drive our decision making and not just be, thinking we know what's going on in terms of health and safety in our community.
To that end, someone had a specific question about you mentioned the MERV filters. How often are those replaced, or, what is sort of the maintenance plan in terms of checking on those? You guys, it's obviously, you guys put a plan into place. You're the largest property owner in the city. There's a ton of schools, and on the schools, there's a ton of classrooms. So how do you, check individually all these things to kind of see how they're working?
Well, I take my clipboard out to each. All joking aside, we have a trained team of people that monitors that. There is a recorded checklist and a cycle that they have to report to their supervisor. And so I don't know the exact detail about number of weeks that the filters are changed, but I know that it's being monitored, and I know that there's a system that our staff is using to monitor that.
For sure. So there's been on Facebook today a lot of questions around the testing and whether that's mandatory or not. So can you kind of get into that as to, obviously there are some parents, and you mentioned most of the people in the city, I think, are not on either extreme that we hear from, and that I'm sure that you guys hear from most. Most people are, tell me when to drop my kid off, tell me what to do. But for the people who are, very opposed to the testing for whatever reason, can you answer that question as to, what happens if a parent says, I'm not testing my kid?
Yeah, so let me start with the why behind testing. This is a moment for us in our community, again, and we've been at this point before, but this is a moment for us to really realize the power of togetherness. And I say that very emphatically, that we need to be together on this. The decision was guided by health professionals. As I shared before, it's a medically oriented decision, and it was guided by health professionals. There are, I'm sure the public knows, there are exemptions for medical and religious reasons that people have access to. And in other cases, we're asking for a family to connect directly with their school administrator if they're going to ask for an exemption to the process that's outside of medical or religious reasons. And so I would just implore the community to think about that this is a decision that is going to affect their own students' classroom. It could potentially affect the closure of the school. Everything that we're doing is around the opportunity to continue to educate students in their school building and to stay in school and not have so many exemptions that really take us down a path that we don't want to go down again this year.
Yeah, I mean, you said it. I think I've mentioned this to you before. I think you probably had the most prescient comment on the pandemic, like a month after you took over as superintendent. You said, we're not planning for COVID going away immediately. We're planning for how do we continue to educate kids during the pandemic, which obviously we're still, in the thick of here, right? Yeah. So what, to that end, how important is the reopening of schools? What did you guys kind of learn from last year with the distance learning regime that has you guys so excited to have kids back in school? And what is different? You mentioned that magic of getting your kids in school. I know for me as a working parent, the magic is I can work without having to keep an eye on the Zoom class as well. But what is that? What did you learn from last year, and what are your kind of thoughts on that? The importance of the physical reopening?
So I'm not shy in saying that I think the magic of education happens in a classroom, in a physical space that's guided by an exceptional teacher. And our educators across the district, they did a fabulous job of doing the best that they could of going through a pandemic themselves and working to educate every child in their care. But I have great hope. We are launching our learning acceleration and support plan. In fact, that started in summer. It involves all kinds of resources. We've hired about 400 additional teachers to be on campuses. That will reduce class size. It will allow some students to be in small groups outside. And it has a really strong focus on care and community. So one of the things that students will experience, your own and others, Mike, is that we've empowered our teachers with a set of tools that we call Smart Restart. These are tools that in classrooms will allow teachers to focus on care and community and not to go fast in getting straight to the academics, because what we know is that student well-being contributes most to them being able to then perform and accelerate academically. So it's kind of a slowed down, you might call it easing into the school year, that should feel really different. We learned that our students have a lot of needs in the spring. We had 14,000 kids in summer session, enrichment as well as supports. And we had an opportunity to ask our students what they need when we come back. And that's been incorporated into this smart restart that's for kindergarten students as well as our seniors coming back into high school. So really looking forward to our teachers' opportunity to engage in that way with our students and not feel the pressure of a first week test or a first week, big assignments. Really just
please no.
Right, no tests, no big assignments, no homework. Teachers are empowered to really just engage with their students and create the community that will take us into the rest of the school year.
On the question of, I think this is something that we've certainly seen a lot, and I know I've heard a lot of people ask at the board meetings. Can you talk about last year? There was distance learning. It was your regular school, but here on Zoom.com, right? I mean, it was it was trying to take a normal school day and transport it into doing it from home. I think there's been some confusion from people who want that option and who are sort of looking to what you guys are offering and what the state has passed a bill to have you offer in the expanded independent study. And from my reporting and what I've heard you guys say, they're really completely non-analogous programs, right? Can you sort of get at the heart of maybe that confusion for people?
Sure. So the legislation that allowed for the version of distance learning that we implemented last year sunsetted in June. It was replaced by new legislation around independent study. So you called it expanded independent study. Right now, we have about 600 students that are opting into an independent study program that by age level will involve some direct instruction and daily contact with one of our professional educators. Most of the day then is spent in independent work with either a guardian, a caregiver, or perhaps in some other setting that is comfortable to the family. So very different than several hours of what was known as synchronous or live instruction with a teacher. And that's based on authorization by the state. We are pressing in all ways possible for the state to make some revisions to what is available in that. The other thing that I think is important to know, we've been asked a lot about what happens when students are quarantined and what's the learning look like for that. So we will have students who either because they've had exposure at home or because there has been an exposure at school that requires that they quarantine. There is a short-term version of independent study that the state has authorized us to use. So assignments will be loaded to that particular student's Canvas page, the teacher's page. Things that other students did in that classroom that day, they will have access to their teacher and those assignments on a short-term basis while they are quarantined.
Okay.
In a situation, and I've been asked this, so I'll just be really transparent about it. It is possible that we will have whole classes and hopefully not whole schools, but quarantined. We will use that short-term independent study that will involve more teacher contact on a short-term basis to get through those days.
Okay. I think that's a question that we've seen quite a bit as well, right? Is It's just not very likely, anywhere in the country that's a larger school district, that this is going to be a perfectly clean school year, and that's just obviously the unfortunate reality. So that's a good answer that I know a lot of people will appreciate.
I also think that's an important point, because even with all of the health and safety measures that have been put in place, we are expecting to manage COVID, but not see any COVID in our school buildings. And as much as we can help the community to know that we're prepared for that, but it will not be that there is not a COVID exposure in a school. And so we're prepared for it.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. That's good. I'm happy again as a parent to kind of know that there's a plan in place for what that would look like. I'd like to just sort of underline this for people, just because I think, you guys work in education. So there's a lot of things that you have known for 20 years that maybe our average fourth grade parent doesn't understand. The reason that you're talking about the legislation, the importance of that, if I understand it, is the state has to agree that the diplomas you guys are handing out mean something, right? So normally there was not a world where you could not physically attend school and still receive credit for, being in attendance and doing things. So when you're talking about the legislation, that's what you mean, right? The state has to tell you guys what school looks like. You don't get to just say, I want everyone on campus. I don't want everyone on campus. Like, that's guided by the state leadership. Am I right in thinking that?
That's correct. Yeah. Including the number of minutes that students are required by grade level to be in school. Yes, it is guided by the state.
Sometimes I think you guys are too nice. If I was you, I would be saying this is, take it up with someone else. But okay. In terms of some of the other questions that we've gotten, the district is a certain amount of the way through with putting HVAC into, all of the different classrooms. How much does that, or does that not help with the filtration and the ventilation that you were talking about? Is every room, even that has the HVAC, need to get a filtration unit, or what is the science around that aspect of it, I guess?
Yeah, so great question. One of the silver linings of the pandemic has been the acceleration of many of our construction projects. And so, yes, many more classrooms will have HVAC systems when students walk into them next week. And every single classroom that does not yet have HVAC in it has a HEPA air filtration system that's a standalone system. And so regardless of whether the classroom has HVAC yet or not, there is an air filtration system in every classroom that's being used. And that's something that our facilities team went out in the spring, assessed every classroom, and it's something we've had in place since spring.
Okay. You've mentioned, and I've heard Dr. Brown mention a few times as well, the sort of encouragement of using the outdoor spaces, I think sort of particularly for elementary schools where it's one teacher and the same kids for the whole day. What does that look like? What is some sort of ideas that maybe you guys have passed down through the level offices of how the outdoors will sort of be used in a different way?
Yes, we have absolutely encouraged all of our school sites to look at their outdoor spaces as classroom spaces. There are additional shade structures that have been put in. Lunch benches have been moved outside so that students can eat outside. We're fortunate, I guess, that, well, first of all, the forecast for next week is to be 77 degrees every day of the week, which will give us an opportunity to have lots of outside time. But we've just encouraged all schools, not just elementary, but definitely elementary, take your reading group outside, do a lecture on the grass if you're secondary, and certainly anything that involves eating or something that a student would need to take their mask off for. We've encouraged the use of outdoor space. So I think across the community, as you're seeing schools next week, you're going to see lots of kids outside for many different kinds of activities. I'll also encourage people in the moment to have your kids wear sunscreen. And so, not joking, we need students to also be safe outside. And so for families that are preparing for next week, get your sunscreen out, because students will be outside more than they might have been in the opening weeks of school before.
That is a good tip as well. What have you heard from, you've been in the district for a long time, and I know you've got a lot of, very deep relationships with the people who work for you. What are some of the stories that you've heard either from students or parents or from teachers and principals that have sort of pulled you through the last couple of weeks that people are really looking forward to about next week, or, any of that?
Yeah, great. Well, I live next door to a teacher who's excited to come back. She was a teacher who made a room into a classroom in her home to teach from home, but she's expressed a lot of excitement about coming back. But I'll start with students. So I've been really blessed to have a lot of connection to our students. In fact, yesterday I was out in the community delivering an NAACP scholarship to one of our students who's heading off to Dartmouth next week. But our students are very excited. They see the work that has gone into preparing for schools to be ready. They're out experiencing band practice and all of the other things. They seek the relationships with their teachers and their friends. And so for them, that's what I stay focused on. The opinions or the emotion of all of this, I can step back from that always when I think about what our students tell us about what a school means to them, what a relationship with a caring teacher means to them, what it means to see their friends. And so for me, it's always about stepping back and really thinking about that. And I hear that from teachers as well. That is our why in education. We're here to do the best that we can so that every student leaves Long Beach Unified ready for college or career, and is empowered by what they've experienced in the district.
I appreciate you saying that. It is, as someone who's been normally a sports writer, but has been doing some education reporting throughout the pandemic, I sometimes feel like there's sort of two worlds. It's like you go outside and emotions are running really high, and then I come home and my about to be third grader is just like, sweet, yeah, school starts next week.
Right. Yeah.
So I think that is an important thing to keep in mind in the coverage, as well as sort of the day-to-day life. Do you have anything else? I mean, I think that actually was sort of most of the questions that we've gotten. Is there anything else that you want to share or make sure that the community is aware of, other than bring sunscreen, because that's good advice given the outdoor component?
I just feel really grateful. As I said, I think there is a lot of emotion about this time, but I have had so much outreach that is positive outreach from members of our community. So, keep going. We can't wait to see our students back in the building. They're accessing sports activities, enrichment activities, after school programming is up and running. And so I feel grateful to work in a place, not only that, our Board of Education, their connection to the community and all that they are sharing with their constituents, as well as bringing back to us to address things that parents are asking. I feel really grateful to work in a place that is that supportive of education.
Well said. Dr. Baker, thank you so much for sharing your time, and look forward to being out there next week and, seeing all the kids back in class. Oh, last question that I've seen 1,000 times. The kids are wearing uniforms, correct?
Kids are wearing uniforms. Yeah.
Okay.
They're wearing their uniforms, but I do want to let the community know if there are any challenges for a family. School offices are open right now. They keep a back stock of uniforms that can be passed out to a family. We have beautiful support from the Assistance League of Long Beach, who close more than 10,000 of our students every year. That is still available through a school office. And so let's not let a need be something that keeps a student from wearing a uniform.
Well said, Dr. Baker. Thanks again for joining us. Good luck with everything next week, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you. Look forward to seeing all our kids on Tuesday. We'll see you back at school. Take good care.
Bye.